Welcome to Malifaux University. 308. Activation Phase, Abilities. To effectively use a model, you'll need to understand how its abilities work. The text on the front of each model's card, below its stats, is its abilities. Every model has anywhere from 2 to 6 abilities. Although some abilities take effect at certain times, they are considered always on, and usually don't cost an action. Since they are always on, they can sometimes take effect even during another model's activation. We'll look at some examples of this later on. The 80-20 rule says you'll see about 20% of the most common abilities 80% of the time. Malifaux math may not line up exactly on that, but there are definitely a few abilities you will see on many models' stat cards. A couple of these, Armor and Regeneration, have a variable like +1 or +2. That means they stack. For example, if Dashiell Barker, who already has Armor +1 as an ability, takes the lead-lined coat upgrade when he's hired, that upgrade's Armor +1 stacks with his armor ability to give him Armor +2, which will reduce all damage he suffers by 2 instead of 1. One of the basic rules of Malifaux, though, is that no amount of damage reduction can reduce your damage to 0 unless a game mechanic specifically says so. So, if Dashiell in a lead-lined coat were hit for 2 damage by an attack, he would still suffer 1 damage despite his stacked armor. Regeneration, on the other hand, heals damage you've already suffered. Mortimer has the Regeneration +1 ability, which heals 1 point of damage when he activates. If he were to have the Grave Spirit's Touch upgrade, which comes with Regeneration +2, they would stack to heal 3 points of damage at the start of his activation. The other most common abilities include Flight. This gives your model another way to move around the table. Instead of walking around the table or charging in a straight line, Flight lets you pick up the model and place it completely within range of its movement stat. Be sure to measure before you pick up the model. Hard to Wound and Hard to Kill are related but different abilities. When a model is hard to wound, it simply means that any damage flip against that model has a negative modifier. This applies to projectile attacks, melee attacks, or any other way a model might hurt this one. Naturally, when it's your model who is hard to wound, it's up to you to inform your opponent of this ability before she flips for damage. When a model is hard to kill, this affects how much damage it can suffer from one attack. If it has 2 or more health, no amount of damage can kill it all at once, even if it says the damage is irreducible. If Seamus were down to 4 health when another model successfully attacked and did 5 damage, it would bring Seamus down to 1 health because he's hard to kill. It would take another attack to then finish Seamus off. Another ability that can reduce damage is Incorporeal. This one reduces all damage caused by attack actions by 1 and specifically says it can reduce damage to 0, so that's kinda cool. Unless you're the one trying to kill the incorporeal model, then it's kind of frustrating. Incorporeal models can also move through impassable terrain, are not slowed down by severe terrain, and don't suffer the effects of hazardous terrain. Just because they can move through a building or wall, though, doesn't mean they can see through it when trying to draw line of sight. This ability also says the incorporeal model can move through other models and vice versa. This is great when near friendly models, but if you use the walk action near enemy models, you'll have to deal with their engagement range. Remember that charge, though, lets you ignore engagement ranges. Unimpeded is a common ability that also lets a model move through severe terrain without slowing down. Severe terrain normally costs twice as much movement to cross as regular terrain, so this can make a big difference in how your models move around the table. Unimpeded doesn't affect any other type of terrain, though, and does not reduce damage. Insignificant is an odd one to call an ability, but it's an ability nonetheless. When a model is insignificant, it cannot take the interact action. That means it can't drop or remove scheme markers, but there are several other game effects tied to interact that an insignificant model is barred from. An insignificant model also doesn't count for any scheme or strategy. That means you can kill all the Malifaux rats you want in the Turf War strategy or in the Dig Their Grave scheme, and they won't matter at all for victory points. Terrifying is a common ability that makes it hard to attack the model with this ability. It always has a number in parentheses after it. Most models with Terrifying have a 10 or 11, though a few have a 12, and Pandora has a 13. This number, as the ability states, is the target number of the willpower duel the attacking model must get before it can successfully attack the Terrifying model. For example, if Corvus Rook is trying to hit Pandora with his staggering punch, as soon as he declares his attack, he has to pass the willpower duel. His willpower is 6, so he has to flip a 7 or better to get the target number of 13 listed in Pandora's Terrifying ability. Let's say he flips a 5 and chooses not to cheat fate. His attack fails before it even begins. He has another action available, so he declares he will attack Pandora again with his staggering punch. He has to make a brand new willpower duel and get the target number, or this one will fail too. Let's say it's later in the turn, and this operative wants to shoot Pandora with her Derringer. She declares her attack and must pass the willpower duel, or her attack fails. The operative's willpower is 5, and she flips a 10. She may proceed with her attack. Cards are flipped, and Pandora suffers damage from the Derringer. The operative wants to attack again with her second action. Even though she has already passed one willpower duel against Pandora, as soon as she declares her new attack, she has to make a new willpower duel for the new attack. Manipulative is another ability that makes it hard to attack the model, but it's more low-key than Terrifying. If the manipulative model has not already activated in the turn, any attack actions against it have a negative modifier. While it does not provide the possibility of immediate failure that Terrifying brings, it does provide the comfort of knowing that the attacking model cannot cheat fate when it has a negative modifier. Of course, the cure for Terrifying and manipulative models is a Ruthless model. Any model with the Ruthless ability gets to ignore other models' Terrifying and manipulative abilities, attacking them normally. While these 11 abilities are common throughout the game, some abilities are common among certain keywords and factions. Models with the family keyword, for instance, typically have the Incorporeal and Bravado abilities. Most mercenary models have Battle Tempo, and most Big Hat models have Bayou Bash. There are many other examples, but if you play a crew with a shared keyword ability, be sure to take the time to practice the coordination that ability may bring to your models. Other abilities will have certain timing tied to their effects or special phrases embedded in their wording. When hiring abilities affect how the model or other models in its crew are hired. This might mean they get to borrow a keyword, like Sandeep Desai. He has the academic keyword, but his elementalist ability loans him the elemental keyword when hiring. Later during the game, any game effect that refers to an elemental model will not apply to Sandeep, since he has that keyword only during the hiring stage of the game. Other when hiring abilities change the relationship the model has with others. Marcus's Beastmaster ability lets him treat all beast models in his declared faction, either Arcanist or Neverborn, as versatile, so he can hire them without a common keyword and at no soulstone penalty. Still other when hiring abilities change the cost of hiring the model. The Calypso Mark II has the original Creator's ability that says its cost lowers from 6 soulstones to 4 if both Dr. Beebe and Maxine Agassi are also in the crew. Similarly, the Effigy model in each faction has the Helping Hand ability, which says its cost is reduced to 0 if hired into a crew led by a henchman model. A few abilities take effect before the crews are deployed. Scout Ahead lets a player pick a model in the opponent's crew and requires it to be deployed immediately before the rest of the crews deploy. The Home on the Range ability, shared by many Frontier keyword models, takes effect during deployment. Every model with this ability gets to deploy 1 inch beyond their deployment zone for every model with this ability. If there are 5 models with Home on the Range, each of those 5 would get to deploy up to 5 inches outside their regular deployment zone. From the Shadows lets a model deploy at the start of the game, after both crews are deployed, but you have to remember to set that model aside when deploying the rest of your crew. More common, though, are abilities that say after deployment. These take effect after both crews are completely in place. If multiple effects need to happen at once, the player with initiative picks the order, and that's the attacking player at the very beginning of the game until the first initiative flip. These effects might involve creating underbrush markers with Titania's Abundant Growth ability, or handing out Brilliance tokens with Jacob Lynch's Welcome to the Honeypot ability. Some abilities take effect in the start phase of each turn. Often these affect the initiative flip, such as Ill Omens, or control hand size, such as Arcane Reservoir. The Battle Tempo ability, common to mercenary keyword models, lets each of them push up to 2 inches at the start of every turn. The Obsidian Statue's Intense Heat ability increases the burning condition on every enemy model on the table as long as they already have the burning condition. Other abilities kick in during the end phase of the turn, though they often don't expressly say the end phase. The Brewmaster's Alcohol Poisoning ability increases the damage enemy models suffer from the poison condition, and Carlos Vasquez's Playing with Fire ability gives enemy models the distracted condition when he suffers damage from the burning condition, both of which usually take place during the end phase. Molly Squidpidge's totem, the Necrotic Machine, has the Ceaseless Advance ability that lets it push 2 inches and take an action during the end phase as long as its opponent has depleted its control hand. Some abilities attach upgrades to the model or another model. This is more common as an action, but a few models like Shenlong and Yanlo have these on the fronts of their cards. We will have a full video discussing upgrades later, but it's one more detail to watch out for on your model's cards. If a model has a Demise ability, that means something special happens when it is killed. Bad Juju's Demise ability lets him discard a card and then heal after he's killed, but only once per turn. Several Ancestor and Retainer keyword models have a Reliquary Demise ability that attaches an upgrade to another model in their crew that gives that model some of the killed model's abilities and actions. The Coryphée Duet's Demise ability lets it replace itself with 2 mannequin models, while the Iron Skeeter's Demise ability causes an explosion that sets everyone within 2 inches on fire. Some abilities have a once per turn restriction. That really is as simple as it sounds. That ability may not be used more than once in a single turn. This Bayou Gator has a Flurry ability that lets it discard a card after using its Mighty Jaws to make that attack again for free. If this Gator does this during its activation, possibly attacking with its Mighty Jaws 3 times, it cannot use that ability during Zoraida's activation when she casts Obey on the Bayou Gator and has it use its Mighty Jaws 1 more time. An ability that says once per activation, though, can be used as often as its conditions are met, but only once during any given activation. Let's say Seamus is in a scuffle with a guard patrol and he's down to 4 health. His Feast of Fear ability says he heals 2 when an enemy model fails a willpower duel caused by Seamus. The guard declares he will use his sword on Seamus. Seamus has the Terrifying ability with a target number of 12. The guard's willpower is 4, and he flips a 4 for a total of 8. He fails the willpower duel, and Seamus heals up to 6. The guard tries again to use his sword, and makes another willpower duel to overcome the Terrifying ability. He flips a 5 for a total of 9, and ends his activation. Seamus does not heal for that second willpower duel failure, because he can use his Feast of Fear only once during the guard patrol's activation. But now that it's Seamus's activation, he can use Terrorize on the guard patrol, starting another willpower duel. If the guard fails to resist that attack, Seamus will heal up to 8, and the guard will be pushed away from Seamus. Seamus could do it again, just to push the guard around, but Seamus wouldn't heal again from Feast of Fear, since he already used it during his activation. Some abilities provide what is known as a resistance trigger. They may name defense, willpower, or both, as in the case of Gwyneth Maddox. Her Unimpressed resistance trigger has a crow in it, and states that if the attacking model declared a trigger when attacking, the damage she suffers is reduced by 2. To make a resistance trigger happen, you have to flip the suit named in the model's ability when making your defense flip. Of course, if the model can use soul stones, it can use a soul stone before the flip to put that suit on the flip. Let's say that this Bayou Gremlin uses his boomstick on Gwyneth. He flips a 12 of rams to go with his stat of 3 for a total of 15 of rams. Gwyneth flips a 2 of crows for a total of 7. Neither of them cheat fate, and the gremlin declares the wild shot trigger because the italics rules on his boomstick says he must. He flips a 2, scoring 1 point of damage, but the trigger adds 1 to that for a total of 2 points of damage. Because the gremlin declared a trigger when Gwyneth had a crow in her defense flip, she gets to use her unimpressed resistance trigger and reduce the damage by 2 points. Mathematically, this would mean she suffers no damage, but she's not allowed to reduce damage to 0 unless the game effect specifically says so. She takes 1 point of damage. Other models have both a resistance trigger and the suit for that trigger embedded in their stats. Look at Professor von Stuck. He has a crow in both his defense and willpower stats, and has a crow in his disarming resistance trigger. Unless some game mechanic removes the suits from his duels, he will always have a crow in his defense flips, whether for defense or willpower, so will always get this trigger. A few general rules to remember when dealing with abilities. Abilities don't stack unless they do. Usually, that means they have to have a plus sign before a number in order to stack. Some models like Winston Finnegan have an Arcane Reservoir ability that increases his crew's maximum hand size by 1. It doesn't say by +1 though, so if there were another model in the crew that also had an Arcane Reservoir, they would not combine to increase the maximum hand size to 2. Ill Omens, on the other hand, does have a plus sign. Ma Tucket has Ill Omens +1, adding 1 to her crew's initiative flips. If Trixie Belle, who also has Ill Omens +1, were in the same crew, the two abilities would combine to give the crew +2 to its initiative flips. Auras affect their sources, but pulses do not. This goes hand in hand with the next rule to remember. Every model is friendly to itself. Look at Marcus. He has the Guided Evolution ability that causes him to discard his mutation upgrades when he activates. But he also has the Primal Domain ability that says when a friendly model within a 6-inch aura of Marcus discards a mutation upgrade, Marcus gets to draw a card. Since auras affect their sources, and every model is friendly to itself, this means Marcus gets to draw a card at the start of his activation once he finishes switching out his upgrades. There are more than 700 different abilities in the game right now, and more coming every year. You shouldn't even try to remember what every ability on every card does. If you can, you probably need to find something else to do, because that's an amazing talent. In a game, though, remember what you can, and then rely on the last rule. RTFC. Read the freaking card. That's the overview of abilities. Pick up a printable set of all the markers and tokens you need to play Malifaux in the Wargames Vault. If you haven't already, join our Patreon for early, ad-free access to all new content, and be sure to visit the Malifaux University gift shop for the latest in Malifaux-themed shirts, hoodies, drinkware, and more. Links are in the notes below. And remember, play friendly games, keep it simple, and have fun.